1st, 1992, world leaders from almost every nation on the planet will converge on Rio de Janeiro for the first ever Earth Summit. Held by the United Nations, these leaders will sign treaties that will determine the future of our global environment. At stake is the entire human race.
World leaders attending the UN Earth Summit will consider Agenda 21, an ambitious environmental blueprint for the 21st century, and the Rio Declaration, governing relations between the industrialized and developing nations. Also under consideration, a biodiversity convention and a global climate change treaty. So far, President Bush has been reluctant to commit the U.S. to some restrictive provisions in these proposed agreements.
The U.S. position leading up to the Earth Summit suggests that it's going to be very unwilling to make commitments to cooperative action with the global community of nations. We feel that's irresponsible. It's out of touch with today's world. It suggests that the U.S. is on another planet, if you will.
Joining us to discuss the upcoming Earth Summit is Maurice Strong. He is the UN General Secretary of the conference. Previously, Mr. Strong served as Secretary General of the first UN Conference on the Environment, which met in Stockholm 20 years ago. Later, he was Chairman, President, and Chief Executive of Petro-Canada. That's Canada's national oil company. Mr. Strong, why is now the time for an Earth Summit?
The Earth Summit really is a major recognition on the part of the governments of the world that despite all the progress we've made in caring for the environment over the past few decades, that the condition of our planet has continued to deteriorate and global risks have become more immediate and more acute. Therefore, we have to elevate this issue to the attention of the world's leaders, and they will come to Rio on June the 3rd, the largest assembly ever of world leaders. That's really why we call it the Earth Summit. It is literally a summit conference of the leaders of all the countries of the Earth who are coming together to take decisions that will have an important and perhaps even decisive effect on the future of our planet.
What do you hope will be accomplished at the Earth Summit?
Well, first and foremost, we have to use the summit to ensure that people around the world realize that we are at a very major point of civilizational change, that we cannot continue on our present economic pathway. We've got to make major shifts in our economic behavior, and if we do, both our economic future and our environmental future can be very promising indeed. If we don't, both our economic life and our environment can only deteriorate. Today, we have come to realize that the very same processes that have produced such wealth and prosperity and power in the industrialized countries have also largely caused tremendous deterioration in the environment and the natural resource space and in the life-supporting ecosystems on which human life itself depends. And that these endanger the future of all, rich and poor, and that the cooperation of all, rich, poor, east, west, north, and south, is needed as never before to solve these problems. And this means setting up a cooperative regime, a new global partnership to deal with these issues, transcending some of the differences that continue to cause nations to work in counterproductive directions, not only from each other, but in terms of their own environment and economic interests. We're going to continue to have differences, but we've got to realize that our common interest transcends those differences and must dictate that we do move together onto that pathway to a more secure future.
Global climate change is very high on the agenda for discussion at the conference. How great is the threat from global climate change?
Most of the scientists in the world do agree there's a problem. After all, even those who have not joined the widespread consensus amongst scientists that this problem is a serious and acute one and needs action, do acknowledge that the filtering mechanism of the atmosphere, which is the CO2 and the related greenhouse gases, is being affected, that we are putting literally hundreds of billions of tons of CO2 and other gases into that filter, and it's bound to change the filter. And that filter is the thing that, on which the heat balance of the Earth depends, and therefore the climate depends. So we can't affect the filter without affecting the climate. There's controversy on the degree and the extent and the time frame, and even controversy on the degree to which this will be necessarily catastrophic. Some say there may be some offsetting benefits. But on the issue of whether or not this is a legitimate concern, there can be very little doubt.
On issues of global warming, there's a great deal of scientific, let alone political disagreement, and some have suggested it might be a rush to judgment to try to deal with this particular problem now. Is it a rush to judgment?
Well, first of all, I think we have to recognize that we're dealing with something very, very fundamental. We're dealing with the very future of our planet. Surely, if we have to operate on the precautionary principle, this is an area in which to do with. This is a cancerous condition, and like cancer in a human being, you have to respond to the early signals. By the time the signals become so acute that they're really painful, it's too late to change. And that's we face that phenomena now. And also, most of the things that we have to do, at least in the early stages, are good for us economically. For example, improving energy efficiency. The Japanese today have a real economic competitive advantage over the US and others like Canada, simply because they use only half the energy to produce a unit of production that we use in North America. Well, that's good for the environment, but it's also very, very important in competitiveness terms. So much of what we must do to affect the climate is also good for us economically.
How much, and we know it's going to be a large figure, but just speculating, how much do you anticipate the cost of correcting the globe's environmental problems might be?
Well, first of all, we have to be clear about what is cost. Cost is really it's not just extra money that you pull out of the air at a time when money isn't very easy to come by. It really has to come through better use of and redeployment of our existing resources. Now, the amounts of money we're talking about, in terms of, let's say, just the developing world, well, that's almost 80% of the people of the world. We're talking, for the developing countries alone, of some $625 billion per year, of which 80% has to come from them. And that's not easy. That will have to come through redeployment of their own resources and reorientation of their policies. But some 20% would also have to come from the industrialized countries. And once we accept that global environmental security must be a priority for us, some of the most cost-effective things we can do are in the developing world. It's in our interests. It's not a reversion to the old foreign aid syndrome. We've got to look at it in terms of an investment in our own environmental security, and one which makes good sense for us economically as well.
Mr. Strong, thank you very much. Coming up, will the Earth Summit put the environment back on America's election agenda? John Schneiderwind analyzes the situation.
Cleaning up and protecting the environment would be a major priority of my administration.
4 years ago, George Bush proclaimed he would be the environment president. Since 1988, Bush has signed the Clean Air Act into law and stumped for a policy calling for no net loss of wetlands. Bush's policies attracted criticism from both Democrats and Republicans, and activists envisioned 1992 as the year when the environment would become a major campaign issue. But a funny thing happened on the way to the green election. The recession shifted the political focus from the environment to the economy. Moreover, Democratic candidates, such as Paul Tsongas, Jerry Brown, and Bill Clinton, rarely spoke out on the environment. Environmental activists, however, hope that the June UN conference on the environment and development will raise the profile of the environment as an issue and bring it into the fall presidential election campaign.